So this path is defined parametrically with this vector qt. And remember, the vector qt is just going to point to where the object is at different times. So the x value of the object's path is determined by root t, and the y value is determined by 1 over t. So like for example, at time t equals 4, we would be at x equals 2, y equals 1/4. And this will tell us always where the object is after a certain amount of time. Now this is asking for the velocity of the object, this velocity vector, which we're just going to call v of t. And how we write this vector is we write the components. So we would write the derivative of our x value with respect to t and our derivative of our y value with respect to t. So the derivative of root t and the derivative of 1 over t. So the derivative of root t is 1 over 2 root t. So that's the function that's going to model our horizontal velocity. And then the derivative of 1 over t is negative 1 over t squared. So that is going to model our vertical velocity. Really quickly, I'll show you how we get those derivatives, but those are a couple that we just do enough that hopefully we start to remember them. So for root t, we can write that as t to the 1/2 power. So then when we do our power rule, we would get 1/2 out front times t to the negative 1/2. Since we have that negative exponent, we can write 1 over 2 times t to the positive 1/2, which is equal to 1 over 2 root t. For 1 over t, we can write that as t to the negative 1. So if we do our power rule, we get negative 1 t to the negative 2, which is equal to negative 1 over t to the positive 2. All right, so this is our vector that's describing our horizontal and our vertical velocity. Okay, part B gives us a different one with sine t comma 2t squared, and it's asking for the horizontal and vertical velocity at time t equals pi over 4 and pi over 6, 5 pi over 6. So first, the derivative of sine t is cosine t, and the derivative of 2t squared is 4t. So we're just going to plug in our t values to find our velocity. So v of pi over 4 equals, okay, cosine of pi over 4, cosine of pi over 4 is square root 2 over 2. And then 4 times pi over 4 is just going to be 4 pi over 4, which is pi. Okay, so our horizontal velocity is root 2 over 2 at pi over 4, and our vertical velocity is pi, so it's moving to the right and it's moving up. And then if we do 5 pi over 6, okay, we're going to get cosine of 5 pi over 6, which is in the second quadrant, so it's negative, and the pi over 6 reference angle is going to give us negative root 3 over 2. And then 4 times 5 pi over 6 is just 20 pi over 6, which you could also write as 10 pi over 3.